Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Alicia Watley.
I'm Mike Brode.
I'm Tim Havler.
And I'm Brennan McLaughlin.
Hey Brennan, what's the scenario?
Isn't it Tim's turn to do a scenario?
Wait a minute, I thought it was Mike's turn.
Oh, hold on here now. Alicia, don't you have anything to talk about?
I never come with a scenario. I don't know what you're talking about. But, we've done so many of these. Let's just play another one.
A replay, a best of. That will be very exciting.
For the next 2 weeks over the holidays, we're going to feature some excellent podcasts from before we rebranded as What's the Scenario with PLRB. These segments were called the Coverage Contrarian, and they featured PLRB coverage attorneys Michele Hunter, Eric Friedmann, and Frank Gagliardi as they've argued vociferously about coverage issues big and small. This week, we'll explore the scenario of an e-bike slamming into a tree. Let's listen in.
Before we begin, Eric, would you please enlighten us on the different classes of e-bikes?
Sure. States handle the classes of e-bikes differently. In Illinois, for example, the statute defines low-speed electric bicycle as a bicycle equipped with fully operable pedals and an electric motor of less than 750 watts that meets the requirements of one of the following classes. Then the statute goes on to list three different classes. A is a class 1 low-speed electric bicycle, which means a low-speed electric bicycle equipped with a motor that provides assistance only when the rider is pedaling and that ceases to provide assistance when the bicycle reaches a speed of 20 miles per hour. B is a class 2 low-speed electric bicycle, and that means a low-speed electric bicycle equipped with a motor that may be used exclusively to propel the bicycle and that is not capable of providing assistance when the bicycle reaches a speed of 20 miles per hour. Then C, class 3 low-speed electric bicycle, means a low-speed electric bicycle equipped with a motor that provides assistance only when the rider is pedaling and that ceases to provide assistance when the bicycle reaches a speed of 28 miles per hour. Also, under Illinois law, a low-speed electric bicycle is not considered a moped or a motor-driven cycle. So that's the Illinois way. But in New York, that state defines a class 3 e-bike differently than Illinois. Under New York law, a class 3 bicycle with electric assist is solely within a city having a population of 1 million or more. A bicycle with electric assist having an electric motor that may be used exclusively to propel such bicycle and that is not capable of providing assistance when such bicycle reaches a speed of 25 miles per hour.
Great, thank you, Eric. And because you told us of the Illinois classifications of e-bikes, let's first consider a scenario involving an e-bike accident in Illinois. The insured, let's assume, purchased a class 1 e-bike and then was injured off of the insured location when he got distracted and ran into a neighbor who was walking her dog.
I hope the dog is okay.
The dog is fine, Frankie. It was only the lady who was injured. So the question is there any coverage for the insured under the current HO3 homeowners form?
That's good news for the dog. But as for coverage, wouldn't that depend on whether the insured was using the electrical assist at the time of the accident? Because otherwise, wouldn't the e-bike just be treated like a regular bicycle?
That's a good point, Frankie. Let's assume for purposes of this scenario that the insured was using the electrical assist at the time of the accident.
Well, then we would need to look at the language in the policy. You said we're talking about the current HO3 homeowners form?
Right, that's correct.
Okay, so under the current HO3 homeowners form, the motor vehicle liability means the following: liability for bodily injury or property damage that arises out of the operation or use of such a vehicle by any person. And the policy goes on to state that a motor vehicle means a motor vehicle, which means a self-propelled land or amphibious vehicle.
Okay, so under that language, Frankie, would the e-bike meet the definition of a motor vehicle because it is self-propelled by virtue of the electrical assist?
No.
Yes,
You two don't agree.
an e-bike would meet the definition of a motor vehicle under the policy based on the policy's definition of self-propelled, and I can prove it. At least one Illinois legal dictionary source has referred to the term self-propelled in the following manner. A self-propelled vehicle means a vehicle propelled by its own engine or motor. Self-propelled vehicles include, but are not limited to, all-terrain vehicles, autocycles, low-speed electrical vehicles, low-speed gas vehicles, mopeds, motor-driven cycles, and motorcycles. A self-propelled vehicle does not include aircraft or watercraft.
Frank, you're wrong. An e-bike is not a motor vehicle for purposes of liability coverage under a homeowner's policy.
But it's self-propelled. I just read you the definition.
Frank, you can't just look at the definition of motor vehicle under the homeowner's policy. You have to look at Illinois law to see if an e-bike is considered a motor vehicle.
But Michele was asking about the policy definition of motor vehicle, which an e-bike satisfies.
An e-bike might satisfy the policy's definition of a motor vehicle, but it does not satisfy the Illinois statute's definition of motor vehicle.
Okay, so I'm listening.
Under Illinois law, and again, Frank, this is the Illinois statute's definition of motor vehicle. An e-bike is excluded from the definition of motor vehicle. The Illinois statute defines motor vehicle as every vehicle which is self-propelled.
See? Self-propelled. That's exactly what I said.
Frank, if you'd let me finish, the Illinois statute defines motor vehicle as every vehicle which is self-propelled and every vehicle which is propelled by electric power obtained from overhead trolley wires, but not operated upon rails, except for vehicles moved slowly by human power, motorized wheelchairs, low-speed electric bicycles, and low-speed gas bicycles. My point is that the Illinois statute expressly excludes e-bikes from the definition of motor vehicles.
Are there any other states that exclude an e-bike from the definition of a motor vehicle, or is Illinois an anomaly in this respect?
Some other states do exclude e-bikes from their definition of motor vehicle, such as Indiana and New York. So it's really important to know what jurisdiction you're dealing with.
Well, I guess if an e-bike isn't even considered a motor vehicle under Illinois law, then I guess there's no point in discussing the motor vehicle exclusion.
That's correct.
But let's say a state didn't exclude an e-bike from the definition of a motor vehicle. Then the motor vehicle exclusion would still apply and bar coverage for an e-bike accident.
Sure.
But Eric, you're forgetting that some homeowners policies have a separate definition for a motorized vehicle. It's not just the definition of motor vehicle that's at issue. Some policies contain a separate definition for a motorized vehicle.
I thought we were talking about motor vehicles, not motorized vehicles.
We were talking about motor vehicles, but now we're talking about motorized vehicles. You can't tell me an e-bike would be excluded from the definition of a motorized vehicle under the current homeowners 03 policy.
Frankie, maybe you could share with us the definition of a motorized vehicle under a current HO3 homeowners form.
Well, gladly, Michele. The definition of a motorized vehicle under a homeowner's HO3 policy is, quote, a self-propelled land or amphibious vehicle, regardless of method or surface contact. This includes parts and equipment. This does not include vehicles that are designed and used to assist the handicapped and are not required to be licensed for road use, end quote.
I can see that you're back on your self-propelled shtick. Does your argument come in either short or interesting?
Well, Eric, even if a e-bike doesn't satisfy the definition of a motor vehicle, It most certainly satisfies the definition of a motorized vehicle because, as I said, e-bikes are indeed a self-propelled land vehicle.
Okay, is there a point somewhere?
You just can't look at the definition of motor vehicle if the homeowner's policy also has a definition for motorized vehicle, because that might be an avenue for liability coverage.
Well, you always have to be aware of the policy language.
This would also raise the question of whether an e-bike satisfies the definition of, quote, a recreational vehicle if the particular homeowner's policy contains a definition for it.
And once again, Frankie, why don't you enlighten us on the definition of a recreational vehicle under a current HO3 homeowners form?
Happy to. Under the current HO3 homeowners form, a recreational motor vehicle is defined as being, quote, a motorized vehicle, a trailer, or attached equipment that is designed or is used for leisure time activities and which is not a motor vehicle.
Well, as I said, under Illinois law, an e-bike is not a motor vehicle.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Eric. You just made the point. In the states that exclude e-bikes from the definition of a motor vehicle, then an e-bike may satisfy the definition of a, quote, recreational motor vehicle, because a recreational motor vehicle, an e-bike, is one, designed or is used for leisure time activities, and two, is not a motor vehicle. And if that's the case, then you have to see whether the motor vehicle exclusion would apply or whether there would be incidental motorized vehicle coverage provided by the policy.
Okay, let's explore that scenario, Frankie. Let's assume that the particular homeowner's policy has a motor vehicle exclusion that bars coverage for the use of a motorized vehicle, aircraft, or watercraft, except if coverage is provided for by an incidental motorized vehicle or watercraft coverage. Now, under that policy language, could there be coverage for an e-bike accident?
That would depend, as it would depend on the particular circumstances of the accident.
Again, Frank, you have to look at the policy language. Under a current HO3 homeowners form, there may be incidental motorized vehicle coverage for bodily injury or property damage, which occurs on the insured premises and is the result of the ownership, maintenance, use, loading, or unloading of a motorized vehicle if that vehicle is not subject to motor vehicle registration because of its type or use, or a recreational motor vehicle.
Are e-bikes subject to motor vehicle registration?
Not in any of the states I've examined.
Which means that the policy would provide incidental motorized vehicle coverage for an e-bike accident.
As long as the accident occurs on the insured premises. You have to ask yourself, what's the likelihood of that scenario happening? In our original scenario, the insured was off premise when he ran his e-bike into the poor neighbor.
Eric does raise a good point here. Although people are purchasing more e-bikes, they are also renting them in metropolitan cities with a lot more frequency. So what about that scenario? The scenario of a rented e-bike, then is there any possible coverage for an accident there?
Not under the language Eric just read, which requires the accident to occur on the insured premises. But in reviewing this current HO3 homeowners form, it also provides incidental motorized vehicle coverage for bodily injury or property damage that, quotes, results from an insured's use of a recreational motor vehicle which is not owned by an insured, end quote. Assuming an e-bike is a recreational motor vehicle, then bingo, there's coverage for a rented e-bike.
That's a big if, Frank. I haven't seen any case law saying that an e-bike meets the definition of a recreational vehicle.
It meets the plain language of the policy definition, Eric. And if there's no state statute with conflicting language, I think that's all the insured would need to establish coverage.
Okay, why don't we broaden the discussion a bit with a faster class of e-bikes? For bikes that go even faster than, say, 28 miles per hour, is there a class 4 for e-bikes?
Currently, there is no legal class 4 for e-bikes in the US or anywhere else. However, many people refer to anything that goes above 28 miles an hour or that can be powered by both pedal assist and throttle or is over 750 watts as class 4 e-bikes. Technically, these class 4 e-bikes that go over 28 miles per hour, whether they are pedal assist or throttle, would likely be classified as a moped or motorbike and therefore subject to the same laws. In other words, the insured would need a license and, depending on the state, a helmet and license plate with a minimum age.
Who would want to ride an e-bike that goes that fast?
Again, missing the point, Frank.
Okay, boys, I think this is the perfect time to recap today's episode of the Coverage Contrarian. Eric, you're up.
In any coverage issue involving an e-bike, the first step is to consider the jurisdiction you're in and whether that particular state excludes e-bikes from its definition of motor vehicle. If an e-bike is not considered a motor vehicle, then there's no reason to consider the motor vehicle exclusion in the HO3 policy.
And the second equally important step is to see whether the particular homeowner's policy has coverage for either motorized vehicles or recreational motor vehicles, because then there may be other sources of coverage provided by the policy for an e-bike accident on the insured premises or for a rented e-bike.
Well, there you have it. E-bike coverage issues under a homeowner's policy as presented by the Coverage Contrarian and his co-host.
So, Brennan, what can we take away from this scenario?
Well, in any coverage issue involving an e-bike, the first step is to consider the jurisdiction you're in and whether that particular state excludes e-bikes from its definition of motor vehicle. If an e-bike is not considered a motor vehicle, there's no coverage and no reason to consider the motor vehicle exclusion. The second equally important step is to see whether the particular homeowner's policy has coverage for motorized vehicles or recreational motor vehicles, because then there may be coverage for an e-bike accident on the insured premises or for a rented e-bike.
Mike, where can an adjuster go to learn more?
That's a fantastic question, Tim. I think folks could always go out to plrb.org, check under the education section. For a full back catalog of all of our podcasts, most of which include references to related articles, webinars, and other resources. Hey, Alicia, can we share those in the links in the show notes?
Yes. And there you'll be able to find a recap of the key points from this episode, links to our social media, and information on how to submit your own adjuster story. No, don't forget to subscribe and rate us, and we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
The views and opinions expressed in this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies and counsel as appropriate.